Hello, hello.
Hello, Sylvia.
How are you, Rabbi?
Fine, thank God. You're a whole minute early.
I decided I'd better do it early in case I didn't want to. Yesterday, I think I missed a minute or two of your talk.
Okay, so let's go to. Okay, I'm gonna put up the Torah portion. Okay, there we are. There's the Torah portion. Sydney's here. Hello, Sydney. Good to see you.
Hi, George.
George, even better, equally good. Hello, George. Hello, Sylvia. Okay, we are going to begin because it's precisely 12:30 and we only have 15 minutes. So, as you can see, I have placed the Torah reading for the 6th day of the week up here. We tried to stick with the days of the week. We miss Wednesday, so we go back to Wednesday on Thursday if there's something in particular. So, a few points. So, there's a very famous Rashi here. Very famous Rashi here. So that Ves Yehuda and Yehuda Sholach Lefanav El Yosef. He sent ahead of him to Yosef. So Yaakov sent Yehuda ahead to Yosef. Lahoras Lefanav Goshen. Since they settled them in Goshen, Goshen is the more open space to the east of the Nile, basically towards where the Suez Canal is today. And so he sent Yehuda, since Joseph settled them in Goshen, which is where the shepherds were going to settle, because there was land for sheep, and they came to the land of Goshen. Goshen was like the frontier. However, Rashi asks a question. What does it mean, lahoros lefonav? The Medrash and Medrash Rabbah asked the question, what does it mean to show the way before? We say lahoros, to show the way. So lahorot, to show, also means to teach in biblical Hebrew. So the Medrash Rabbah says, Rashi quotes this, that he sent him to set up a place of study. In other words, it was already a family, 70 people, lots of kids. The first thing Jacob worried about was to create a place for the kids to study. In other words, even this early in the development of the Jewish people, we understand that the transmission of whatever knowledge Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov received has to be total, systematic, and democratic. It has to reach everyone in the family. So the Medrash says that the first thing Yaakov worries about, especially if you're going to Egypt, which is a very big and powerful culture, you need to make sure that you're going to maintain your own integrity. But yes, or Yosef Merkavto. So Yosef saddled his chariot. He did it himself. He did it himself out of honor to his father. He even though he was a very important person, he saddled it himself. Vayal likras Yisrael, and he went up to greet Israel, of his father Goshen in Goshen. Vayera Elov, and he appeared to him. And remember that Goshen is between the Sinai and Egypt proper. It's in the eastern edge of Egypt. So if Israel was coming to settle in Goshen, Yosef would leave the capital, would leave Thebes, and he would come towards his father to the east. Vayera Elov, he appeared to him, and he fell on his neck, and he wept on his neck for a while. So the question is, why did Jacob also not fall on his neck, embrace him, and cry? So the Midrash says, Rashi quotes this, that he was saying Shema at the time. In other words, even though the Shema is written in the book of Deuteronomy, its basic premise that Hear, O Israel, Lord our God, God is one, is something that was a tradition that was much older. We'll see this later in Vayechi. So he was at that time praying. So the question is, and when he's ready to set sight on Joseph, he had a whole morning to pray, could have prayed later. Why is he engaged in saying the Shema and acknowledging God's oneness right now? And the simple answer is that on seeing his son, who he never thought he would see again, he felt the most appropriate thing would to acknowledge his debt and thanks to the Almighty. And therefore he was engaged in that, and therefore was not able to interrupt and embrace Yosef. And Yisrael said to Yosef, now I can die, now I have seen for myself you're still alive. What does this mean? Because Yaakov sensed that that his destiny was to bring that the children of Israel would have 12 tribes. So as long as there were no 12 tribes, his life mission was not fulfilled. And therefore he said, now I can die. Now I know my life mission has been fulfilled.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm here. His life's mission's been fulfilled. He has 12 sons, and they're all alive, and they all have children. So now he knows I can die because he's fulfilled his purpose in life. Okay. Now, so what happens next? So Yosef tells his brothers, let me introduce you to Pharaoh. I got to tell them that you came. And you should say, your servants have been breeders of livestock from the start until now, so you can stay in Goshen. Yosef's brothers were big, strong, and capable and intelligent. Obviously, Pharaoh knew that from Yosef himself. Yosef didn't want them co-opted into the whole Egyptian system. So he said, look, tell them we raise sheep. The sheep is a god of the Egyptians. They don't like people who raise sheep. So leave us in Goshen on the frontier in the wild east. And that way, we won't disturb you. And though he didn't say this, his idea was you won't disturb us. Joseph wanted the Jewish people to grow and become a people in an empty frontier, free from the temptations and challenges and entanglements that being involved in the urban Egyptian culture would begin.
This came back from a search.
Okay, now. And so Yosef planned that the Jewish people should, and more since the slavery only began much later, the Jewish people had time to gel and become a people. Because especially at the early stages of everything, we want someone to be able to overcome the challenges the world offers. But when we educate our children, we want to shelter them from all that till they can grow strong. Like in a nursery, you plant in a greenhouse a tree. Once it grows a little bit, you can put it outside, and if it was well bred, even the worst winter storms won't destroy it. But at the beginning, you need shelter. You need a very intense environment. And this is what Joseph is engineering, so that by the time whatever happens to the children of Israel happens, they will already have grown as a distinct nation, independent and different from the nation in which they were embedded. And Pharaoh says, that's a good idea indeed. I'll give them in charge of my livestock too. Okay.
Was Goshen?
Just interesting question, Sheila. I'm not sure because Yaakov lives another 17 years. The idea of Sarah's death after the Akedah, it's entirely possible that it has to do with her service, rather, her finishing her work, rather than the Akedah in particular. Anyways, it's an interesting question. Yes, Sylvia.
I want to know when he selected Goshen, was it a barren country or were there other people living there already?
I think there were some people there, but it was a relatively empty frontier. In other words, one of the things to understand is, that there are many grasses in that part of the world that grow with minimal water, and sheep are capable of eating those grasses because the area around the Nile is very heavily cultivated and very heavily populated. That's why Egypt was a world power for 2,000 years. It had enormous surplus food and therefore wealth from the Nile, because the Nile, that ribbon along the Nile, produced an incredible amount of food and therefore supported a lot of people, which means you have a bigger army than anyone else and so on. So So to the east of the Nile Valley, it's not as it's the world was wetter then. That part of the world was wetter, so there was grass, but there wasn't enough rain to do heavy cultivation. So most of the population of Egypt lives relatively close to the Nile. So the land of Goshen. So the land of Goshen, by definition, the land of Goshen was much less populated because there were much better places to populate. Sometimes in a country, it's all relatively tough place to live. But in Egypt, the Nile Valley was the magnet that drew all the population. So Goshen may have had some people, but it was relatively empty. And since the Jewish people multiplied so quickly, after a while, after, maybe 50, 60 years, they were already the predominant population in Goshen. Which is why they were a people that were not their identity and their cohesiveness was not broken by slavery. So Yosef, as we'll see, is doing a lot of things. We'll see later more. It's the Shabbat reading, but you can look at it. A lot of things to make sure that his family, that the children of Israel will survive and even thrive through the next few hundred years until they leave. Now it says here that he gave them a portion of the best of the land in the region of Ramses. Now Ramses is the frontier. He meant to say he gave them the best land in this frontier in Goshen. Okay. Now, the next reading is basically they run out of money, and they come to Yosef and say, "Give us food." So they sell all their livestock, and they sell everything. The next year we don't have anything left. So this is earlier during the famine. So he says, "Give us our land, and will our land be served to Pharaoh? Pharaoh had all the grain, so Yosef acquired all the farmland for Pharaoh, and he moved the people from town by town, and only the lands of the priests he didn't take. So what he did was basically all the land belonged to the crown. Everyone gets to keep 80% and pays 20% in tax, and he provided the seat, which wasn't a bad deal. But it's interesting, he says, I acquired you and your land for Pharaoh. He didn't say, I acquired your bodies as they offered. Joseph basically says that I'm not acquiring you as serfs, as slaves for Pharaoh, but the land belongs to Pharaoh now. And there are all kinds of discussions as to why this was done. But one of the interesting answers is that Joseph anticipates the enslavement of his people. So once everyone is working for Pharaoh and the government owns everything, so when the Jewish people are enslaved, because the practice is to take everything for the government, everything is owned by the crown. So the Jews will be slaves to the crown, to the government, rather than to individuals. So the Jews have been scattered individually into different homes to be chattel slaves, like you had in the South. The people would be broken up. They would be degraded. They would be abused. This way, whatever harsh punishment inflicted upon them, they worked as a unit for the state. They didn't suffer the moral degradation and oppression that's inevitable with individual family chattel slavery. And as you see in any country where that's been practiced, the negative effects of this kind of individual families owning slaves it's almost 200 years, and we still see in many countries the very deleterious effects of this kind of situation. So the Yosef is ensuring that it's a corporate estate. Everything belongs to the state, and anything that the state will take, including when it enslaved the Hebrews, that belongs to the state. So Joseph ensured that once again, that even in slavery, the Jewish people would remain a distinct entity that would not be broken up and therefore not unduly influenced by the host culture. Okay. So I wish everyone a very wonderful Shabbat and an easy rest of the fast. And every weekday except Wednesday, we meet for this little Torah 15-minute fast lunch. No lunch today, but everyone is, of course, invited. Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and see you all at the next thing. All the best.
Shabbos.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom. Yeah. You too, Sheila. Nice to see you. Okay.